Hey everybody, you are at IGDA Twin Cities, and we've got a couple things going on tonight. If you've never been here before, I see a lot of new faces, or I just forgot a lot of faces. We normally like to do 2 presentations a night. A shorter one, which can be anything from 5 to 20 minutes. It can be a project, it can be a mod, it can be anything you want to show off to people and get feedback or get other people involved in. And then we do kind of a main event. So you'll see both of those tonight. And then kind of jammed in between, everybody that's gone to GDC is going to hold on to the microphone and talk for a couple minutes. So if you want to start thinking now, just highlights. We don't have a whole lot of time, unfortunately. So we've got a team here to start us off from MSD, and they're going to show off a project they did for their class. And I won't try last names, but we've got Josh, Keith, Chris, Adam, and Sean, and I'll let them tell you more about their project called Tag. Okay.
Hello. My name is Keith, and this is Chris, Sean, Adam, and Josh over there in the coat. And we are in the class GD 450, which is basically the last gaming class that we can take. And this project was actually, we came up with the name Tag because it was originally just called the 2 Army game, and then one of us was like, hey, it's a cool nickname, Tag. So that's how we got Tag. And right there's the title screen, which is incomplete because, what's that fuzzy noise? Oh, lights? Whoa. That throws a person off. Whoa, okay. But, back to this now. Tag is not the official name of this game. It's just what, it's the nickname right now. And, of course, the title's not there on the title screen, and it's just sort of incomplete. So, you can talk now.
Well, first off, please judge us slightly because we're not totally through this. We're just about getting to our testing phase. We got most of our game mechanics kind of hammered out, and we still got a lot of playing around with variables and stuff left to do. But here we got our base screen, and on the bottom you have units that you can create, and that plane that pops up there is a little deployment plane. You click on the units to add them into reserves, and then if you right-click on, you get them selected, and then you can drop them onto the game board by just doing a little shift-click. And right now, the different types of terrain we've got, you can see this. Most of it's just grass. That's kind of like a plains. Nothing really going on there. The rocks are a mine. They're mining for iron there. And then the trees, they're mining for wood. And you can use those resources then to create more units. He's got a couple soldiers he's going to put down here. And Keith here did all of our animated sprites and everything. He did a good job. All the artwork, yeah. Not the sprites, but our AI states aren't totally intact right now, but so we just kind of have one going instead of switching through like it should, and obviously we've got to work on making our collisions a little closer maybe. They're getting there. We got the archer shooting from the back a little ways.
So essentially what it is this first unit right down here, which you can see them kind of along going up there, there are miners. And what they do is they collect resources that you use to create the other units. And each, like over here even, or maybe along the very top, there are soldiers that are fighting right now. And they have about a range of just like 1 block out. So different units, miners not included, have different range of attack. So you can even see, like right here, we have a couple dragons coming up. They stop because they're starting to attack this soldier right over here. Whereas the soldier has to go up closer and get to the dragons. Dragons get 2 slots out. 1.5. Okay. Yeah, then the archer is going to be 2 slots out. which you can't see exactly what I mean by slots. I suppose I'm still talking about creating. Right. I suppose that would be a good way to see it. You can see how these like gray texture in it with mountains, and each one of those mountains is on a separate tile. So that's what I mean, I guess, by slots or tiles. And currently, the gray area we have right here does not have a texture on it, but what that actually represents is water. So you'll notice that as the units cross over that, they start to move slower, or they animate slower as well.
Get out my notes. I just wanted to briefly touch base on what we did to make this game. It took a lot of coordination between group members and working together as a group. We had several weeks we spent brainstorming and doing sessions, coming up with ideas for the game itself. And then once we had an idea down, we kind of had an idea like the first couple weeks, and then we just started to refine that idea. We threw out all kinds of information and ideas that we wanted to get in the game that, quite frankly, never made it into the game, as most of you know when designing the game. And so we ran into several obstacles in programming, and I didn't do most of the programming. That was done by Chris and forgetting Sean. Thank you. So it took a lot of coordination, but it was a lot of fun. And I think the only thing I would change differently on this project, if I were to do it again or something like this, and I don't know if everyone is on the same board with it, but I think we need to spend more time in the design phase and laying out, defining what obstacles are going to be in the coding issues which we ran into. Thanks.
He did the terrain, so. But basically, this project, as Josh said, we all probably would agree that we would love to have planned, did more planning for it. But this, the quarter lasts 12 weeks, and this is week 11. So I thought we did a pretty good job of rushing this, basically. So let's see here. Basically, we described the unit types, right? And described and resources. And do you want to talk about what you did for coding? Or my art was pretty self-explanatory.
I can talk a little bit about that. Most of the coding is, I tried to do a lot of object-oriented stuff. So we just have a couple player objects, and they contain linked lists of unit objects and the different unit types inherit from that. And they all have kind of movement speed, attack speed stuff built in, so they can read off the game board depending on where they're at. They can affect their movement speeds and everything. So, I don't know, it's just kind of trying to get it all to work together was a little bit of a hassle, but I think it came together pretty well. Right now it's just on PC. C++, we're using DarkGDK. We figured that would, essentially what that does is it runs DirectX 9, and with our 11-week deadline to get here, we figured DarkGDK would help us get around some of the initial setting up DirectX so we could get a little further, a little quicker. And ended up, things are not nearly as easy to do in DarkGDK. You don't have access to all the kinds of stuff you have in DirectX, which would have been, made some headaches a little lighter, but I think in the long run it worked out pretty well. Anybody else have any questions?
Sound?
No, unfortunately sound has not made it in yet. Yeah.
Tentatively, we do have the computer player in there right now. That was going to be like something that we possibly have later.
It's set up to be a player 2, and it's just run by AI right now. So hopefully eventually we can get some network socket programming done in here and get it to run across multiple platforms or run on multiple PCs at the same time.
What's everybody's background? Technically, in like years.
Too many. I'm just finishing up. I'm about 2 3/4 in. And I think these guys I'm finishing up with an old version of the associate's degree that they canceled out right when I started. And these guys all moved into the next one, and I think they're going on to bachelor's or halfway into their bachelor's by now. You're almost done, yeah?
We all graduate. 3 of us graduate next quarter.
Yeah?
So everybody's getting a lot of programming focus, is that right?
Yeah, trying.
Art.
Yeah, he's our big artist. He did absolutely everything for art.
So this class kind of brings both together?
Yeah, a little bit. This is our final big class, and we try and take everything we learned and throw it all together and spend the quarter making a game. So we spent the first maybe 2.5 weeks doing the ideas and generating stuff and trying to figure out what we were going to do, and then spent about a couple weeks trying to nail that idea down, and then it was programming for the last 5, 6 now. So.
All right, and I just thought of something to actually tell who did what. Chris, he did a lot of the programming just for the player. I did obviously the art. Well, yeah. Well, he turned into basically the programmer, and then Sean here did the terrain. You did.
I did more graphical, kind of bringing in base artwork and stuff like that into the actual program itself.
And cleaning up my artwork, so I just hand him dirty stuff and he cleans it up. That was pretty awesome. And then Josh, he was working on the AI, but he hasn't taken some of the further classes, so a lot of the stuff was, a little too advanced for him, so he asked Chris for his help. And do you have any questions about the art? Because everything I showed him, these guys were like, wow, cool! And so it was, okay, yeah? Yep, could you start it up again? Yep.
What we want to do is make the drone model of the mountain and the trees. We want to shrink those down so that you can see the units around in front and behind them. You know what I mean? But right now, they were a little bigger than we wanted, so we turned off the depth buffer so you can see the units that have actually kind of made their way back there.
The trees themselves, were those actual 3D assets, or is it just
It's all modeling done in Blender, and that's another thing that was pretty challenging for all of us because they had to use DarkGDK, which we hadn't touched in the entire program, and then I had to use Blender and GIMP. And the reason why we wanted to do that was, basically to keep it open source, keep it free, so in case, if we all decide to stay together after the quarter is done and finish this game and try and sell it, it won't, we won't have to run into licensing issues, and I won't have to spend $3,000 buying 3DS Max. And
you guys make it for a smartphone is kind of the idea. You have it sideways, you can just tap on the little units and tap them on the screen and let them go. You know what I mean? Go for a simple interface kind of thing. So I kind of want to start with a simpler interface.
use the inspiration from Plants vs. Zombies?
yeah.
I never played it, but they were like, yeah.
That came up in when we were designing it, and I was like, what can we relate this to? It's kind of like Plants vs. Zombies.
That was like the StarCraft, Warcraft thing in my head. I hadn't played that one, but yeah. So we essentially took that. I don't know if they do resources in that game.
That sounds that you use to build things. So for your archetype line, was it Blender to DirectX to DarkGDK? I was going to say, well, DarkGDK actually has functions that will just recognize the type of models that you can bring into there. So what did you get export from?
We exported it from Blender.
Yeah.
So, into the format?
Yeah, it's not
3D.
3D.
Yeah.
You get a lot of options again. I suppose the unit types.
Is that what you're asking about the units or the models for the tree?
I was just talking about
it was just a little bit of learning about how to actually get the textures on whenever we got that. And he figured out how to actually make the models in the first place, so it wasn't so bad. Well, yeah, so just as even a quick example of that is like the border that goes around the whole thing, as well as the units right down along here, those are all sprites then technically, but then all the units, yeah, like you said, they're plain with an animated texture on them, so they look two-dimensional, but that's just because of when it's flat. Oh yeah. Yep. Well, yeah, different each time, but how it works is that both sides are mirrored from like the top of this side will be the same as the bottom down here, and then they just work that way.
We do get multiple players into it, resource allocation across the battlefield.
Any other questions?
What are some of your top features you would like to add?
One of the things
Sound.
right off the bat that I really wanted to do is we wanted to have the player be kind of more involved in the game, instead of just creating one unit that the player would have to spell or something that takes cast. One thing I want to do is to make an earthquake so that the board would just shift over and it's back in and just use it, just drop through. And that's to come still. Or throw like a fireball down and burn down a forest or something like that so they couldn't take that resource.
Another thing that I would like to do is actually rip out 2D sprites and make it all 3D. But 12 weeks, there's no way I can make 4 units, animate them, texture, stuff with stuff that I've never used before. So it was a miracle I actually got Blender. Wow, it's working.
Is text rendering that should be used to render the numbers provided by DarkGDK? Yep. We just use a basic text rendering. Actually, what we had to do to get that stuff to show up is we had to cut holes in our sprites and put 2D planes colored the same color behind there so that you could see the text over the sprite. It was an interesting fix.
Which I might add was basically like in the last hour right before we came here.
Was DarkGDK actually a course requirement, or was it personal choice?
Personal choice. A couple of the classes with students that we had gone to school with in the past who used it said that it worked really well for them. So we figured, it came up when we were deciding what language we were going to use. We tried our GDK because people had success with it in the past. It was something new to try. So that's why we chose it.
With your randomly generated environment, is there a check to ensure that there's enough of each resource?
Yeah, right now it's checking
it generates, every other column it says it needs either 3 of one or 2 of the other, or it should shoot for that kind of number, and it usually ends up at 4 or 5. And after the first panel generates, the first or second panel generates, it starts checking to see if it's hit those numbers on the next panels. So it should generate at least what it should every time. And then if it goes over that, it's back to random generation again, so it'll decide, you might end up with a row where all 6 are a type of, resource. And we just set it's a double for loop, so, we just set a column to be water, and when it hits that, it just draws water straight down.
Any other questions?
Do the different terrain types affect combat at all? Like, do dragons do less damage on water or anything like that?
No, we were talking about having terrain type affect the attack speed. So, like, if they're fighting on a mountain or something, where maybe footing's not as good, they attack a little slower. But we haven't actually implemented that. But it wouldn't be much. I mean, it's just like a movement. The functions are all written for it in the back. They just aren't implemented right now.
You mentioned some limitations with DarkGDK. Would you use it again?
If I had the time not to use it, I probably wouldn't. I'd probably just go right to DirectX. Because then you don't have access to any of your buffers, or your desk blocks, or, you can't get at UV coordinates and stuff like that. It just kind of makes things a pain to work around it. At least for implementing art, there's more of an issue, I think. And if you wanted to do something like implement shader files or something like that, it might, I don't know why we didn't try that, but I didn't see anything about it when I was looking through stuff. So, I'd probably go to DirectX.
When you were playing the gameplay, were you hoping to have tree resources that would come back, or is it supposed to be more of a fast?
That was part of something we wanted to work through testing. We played around with the idea of renewing resources, so after a set period of time, once it had been mined out, it would pop back up again. But I kind of like the idea of, limiting resources, because then you get down to the end and you're struggling to see or defend or attack. So it'll be one of those things after a few weeks of testing, we'll go one way or the other. Probably test it both ways, though. And we still have lots of playing around to do the numbers. Changing movement speeds, attack speeds, board size, unit hit points, attack ratings, defense ratings, all that fun stuff. Make it a little more balanced.
You said you wanted to use smartphones. Is that built in now with DarkGDK?
No, but we were looking at this as more of a kind of a digital prototype almost for what we wanted to do. Look for the technology that we do because we're on a time schedule. But it'd be nice to pull it into Unity or something like that. Especially once we get 3D models running for the units as well.
Any more questions? Did you know that Unity for iPhone and Android is free right now?
Yeah, they have a pro version or something, right?
Yeah, so that's the page of you can always download the free version, but it only allowed you to publish to web and desktop. You couldn't publish to Android or iPhone.
Oh, really?
But now, if you go on there and register, you can get iPhone and Android one for free.
Okay. That's pretty weird.
It's only for a couple more weeks at least.
Until April 8th, I think.
Until the
8th of April, I think, is when it expires. Of that version of Unity. So,
We actually have deployment to iOS and Android for free.
we're going to kind of cram in the middle here before we take a break. Just kind of see a quick show of hands. How many people here went to GDC? You don't get to leave. All right, pizza. That's good. So it's not something that can really be recapped, but I'll just kind of give a high level, and anybody shout out when I'm doing it injustice. But it's the Game Developer Conference, and it's affiliated with IGDA, but it's not run by IGDA. But they get they get a lot of help, basically, from the people that run the conference, I think, for kind of the co-branding thing. And is it every year in San Francisco?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
well, they have multiple events.
That's a good point.
The big one is in San Francisco.
And then how many other GDC play? Awesome. That's right. Online, that's what I think. Really? Okay. But it's basically a week long, and speaking as somebody that's never gone before, I've gone to SIGGRAPH for a whole bunch of years, and that was kind of my frame of reference. And it's a little bit similar and a little bit different. One of the big differences is they really have a strong split between the first 2 days that they call tutorials and summits, and then the 3 days which they kind of call the main conference, and then also they call the expo, which is all the vendors, all the booths, and that kind of thing. And how many people actually went to the tutorials? Would you be willing to talk about that a little bit? Yeah?
Hi, I'm Dave. I work for Concrete Software in Eden Prairie. We make games for Android and iOS. I'm an art and interactive designer, and I work in UX and interactive systems and kind of making stuff look pretty and feel good. So we went to, my primary reason for going to GDC was to go to the Smartphone and Tablet Summit to just kind of learn from people who are leaders in the industry about their success stories and kind of like how they run their organizations and different methods for best practices for design and monetization and stuff like that. And since it's kind of such a growing, an exponentially growing part of the industry, it's pretty interesting to hear some of this stuff. But, so, I mean, I guess I'll just share, like, one of the things that I thought was the coolest, being an interactive designer, taking away from one of the talks on tactility and just designing for touch control interfaces and thinking about just kind of like the psychological implications of that. And Zach Gage, one of the guys who's an interactive designer who gave a speech, and we all kind of thought he was this hippie-looking artist dude, and like, I'm one to talk, but at the same time, it was just kind of like, oh, what's this guy going to say? He's like, opens up with, well, I'm not a rocket scientist, but, you know, I don't do any development or anything like that, and I do kind of like physical art installations, and so everyone's kind of like dismissive right away. But he gave a really compelling speech on tactility, and just kind of a couple things that I took away were trying to make your touch control schemes feel like a great experience for your body. So he brought up this buzzword, proprioception, which is essentially if your brain sends signals to your muscles to do something. Proprioception is the muscles or that touch sense sending a signal back to your brain that it felt good or it didn't feel good. And so kind of trying to leverage a primary and a secondary feedback when you're designing your control systems for touch interfaces is the best way to make your game feel good. So you want to kind of make an effort to make sure that initial touch doesn't suck, you know? And that your primary feedback is that touch, and the secondary feedback is obviously just any kind of like animation or kind of supplement to that, some kind of interaction with what's going on. And so making sure that you're just kind of leveraging those two things together to make sure that it feels really good. And that two main kind of rules for great touch control schemes are that they should be comfortable, number one, and that two, you want to inspire confidence. You never want to have a situation where your user's thinking more about your control scheme than they are about their goals in the game. And so the key word there is invisibility. So when you're designing interfaces, I don't know how many of you design interfaces or care about designing interfaces or user experiences or the overall feel of the game. It's something that I believe extremely strongly is paramount to the success of any game. It has to have a great feel. And if it doesn't, it can have the best mechanics in the world, and people are going to play it for a little while and put it down. So make sure that when you're designing interfaces and you're designing controls that they seem invisible. And that's just kind of like the mantra that I took away from this. It's just design invisible interfaces. So that would be like my tidbit of knowledge to share from GDC. Thank you.
You're next.
All right, so Scott and I went. Should I make me come up? For us, one of the most valuable things is attending the parties at GDC. All the real action happens in the evenings. And the reason that's so valuable is because, as opposed to sitting in a session where you are on kind of a one-on-one, or many people talking, listening to one person talk, you actually get to interact with people and discuss things with them. For Scott and myself, a really valuable thing would be like the touch arcade parties and the pocket gamer parties, because you can sit down and talk to individual developers, especially iOS developers in our case. So we can really pitch Chipmunk to people. That's kind of what we were doing. Chipmunk is our physics engine. It's a 2D physics engine that's really popular, especially on mobile platforms, but it's kind of used anywhere. So you can sit down and talk to people, really meet them. And that opportunity to meet and connect with people, people who maybe they've heard of you, or maybe you follow each other on Twitter, or those kind of relationships. Actually meeting them is a really valuable part of GDC. Any questions or anything about that? We wore Chipmunk. Scott, you got to stand up. If you get a T-shirt with your name on it, there's a chance that people will actually know who you are. Otherwise, you're just some guy or whatever. So that helps a lot. And yeah, we arrange meetings over Twitter. We arrange meetings over email. The week before GDC, kind of take some time out of your day to make sure you let the world know that you're going to be there. And anyone who wants to meet up with you, you can schedule a meeting. Who's next?
This photo because this was on Touch Arcade today, and this is Zach's face, like right there on Touch Arcade. That was pretty cool. I'd never been either, and as someone who is not really in the industry but like wishes they were, the biggest takeaway I felt was that game design as like a sort of a profession is taken really seriously, and that was kind of news to me because like I've always sort of thought that it was the thing that people like spitball before you make a game and that's it, but really like there are lots of professionals who that's what they do. They make games, they design games, they don't make the art and they don't program, they're just designers. And I felt like actually the best talks I went to were by these designers, because they were talking about sort of the theory of game development and not just not getting bogged down in the details, but talking about like what makes games fun and that kind of thing. And there was so much of that. It was really fascinating. I mean, I saw the dude from Half Brick talk about Fruit Ninja, their update strategy. That was fantastic. And I saw the Plants vs. Zombies guy actually talk about tutorial in their game and how there wasn't one because it was so fantastically designed. And both those talks were really great. It's impossible to recap. There was so much going on, and especially I would say like after the session, the sort of the first 2 days, I felt like, oh my god, like I've absorbed so much stuff. Every session or every time slot, there was at least one thing I wanted to see, if not more. And then Wednesday rolls around, and suddenly there's at least 3 things I want to see, if not more. It was literally like it was just cranked up after that. And there was the expo hall was open, and like all these other things that you could go do that were just like not even going to sessions. It was pretty crazy. So I would recommend it.
One thing I forgot to mention. If you're looking for a job in the industry, especially in kind of like, I want to work for EA or one of the AAA places, the expo, part of the expo is like the business center or career fair sort of thing. where all the major companies are represented, and they're taking resumes, basically. They sit there, they'll go over like your art portfolio, they'll go over your resume with you, give you pointers on how you can improve that, and maybe get you hired.
Yeah, do interviews on the spot. Like you can walk up, show the resume, and they'll start going through the interview process.
Yep.
Should I grab the mic next? Yes. Well, I have no idea what this is.
Just make stuff up. That's what I did.
So I'm going to go with Andy and Scott and say, like, it's great. GDC is the gathering of the industry in San Francisco. I mean, that's where everyone comes from all around the world because that's the event of the year. So I had a great time just connecting with a lot of current and potential business that we have lined up. It was very productive in that sense. You know, the parties, I thought, if you got to the right place, it was good. If you got to the wrong place, it was just loud and annoying. And I remember going to Grease Party and walking out, and like I couldn't talk for a long time, and so that was a bummer. But whose? No. Yeah, I bet he just threw a good party. Yeah. So we won't talk about that. NDAs, I'm sure we'll ensue. And so the biggest takeaways I have, I'll talk about my goals for when I go next time, is being more intentional about the parties I went to. And I was talking to one of our partners, and I was mentioning some of my frustration with it was hard to actually talk to people at parties, and he just said, well, you're going to the wrong parties. And he's like, you need to go here, here, and here, and that's where you need to spend your time, especially as an iOS. If you're interested in iOS, these are the places where people congregate. So as much information, if you guys ever want to go, I would highly encourage if you're interested in game development, because it's just this huge fire hose of information of every possible perspective, which is, I think, highly valuable because you can hear a lot of people talk about every aspect of game design. But try to do as much homework as you can beforehand, and I wish I would have done a little bit more, and and being a little bit more intentional about where I was spending my time, because there's so much information. Being more intentional about what you're spending your time with, I think, is very valuable. So, and then hanging out with the game audio dudes, I'm telling you, they know how to party. That is the thing is key. And they know how to eat hot dogs too.
Thanks. So this was my 6th year at GDC, and I learned something different every year. I keep going because I kind of love it. It's like this high school reunion that just from the time you get off the plane to the time you get back on, it just doesn't stop. It's like a sprint. And there's never enough time to see everything, to do everything, to meet everyone, and just do everything you can to do it. So my big takeaway this year actually sat through very few sessions. For some reason, I was just unable to sit still, I think. But my big takeaway was that it's about people. At the end of the day, we're all just people, right? Doesn't matter whether you are specializing in skeleton rigging, environmental art, whether you're a game designer who specifically works with interface UI. I mean, it takes all kinds, and they all end up there talking about what they're interested in. And I find that some of the best conversations I had were with people who were outside of my discipline, who I really had something to learn from. So I guess that was my big takeaway. It's about people. So, and that's, I think, why I come to the IGDA meeting as frequently as I can, because it's just great to see people, great to talk to everyone, and great to hear what everyone's working on.
Talk a little bit about what was involved in speaking.
Right. So, was anyone here when David Nichols and I did the short race car sound study thing? Yeah? Cool. Right on. So that presentation we did here was part of the process for getting greenlit for the talk that we did at GDC just last week. And when I say we, I mean me. They did not want to approve 2 speakers for a short 25-minute talk. And so at the end of the, I guess, submittal process, phase 2 submittal, they said, okay, this is cool, we dig the concept, we have a super narrow focus, and we want you to come talk about it, but we only want one of you to come talk about it, and Pikachu, we choose you. So, so when I got there, we also decided to be part of this thing they called the Flash Forward presentation Wednesday morning. So this is an intense thing. Did anyone go to this? Yeah, okay, probably went to this. So this Flash Forward thing was crazy. It's the first year they've done it. Thanks. SIGGRAPH does something similar where they invite people who are speaking up on stage for 30 seconds to give their kind of elevator pitch about what they're presenting, why people should come, and people who are in attendance then can get a really solid overview of all of the different sessions that are going on, and they just get little snippets of it, so they can say, hey, that sounded kind of cool, and it's a little bit outside my discipline, but that person sounded like they could really pass on some cool information. So this was Wednesday morning, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, whoa. So early, and everyone was just kind of, wired up for it, get on stage in front of everyone, and, I'm kind of a go big or go home guy, and so my presentation was done, again, racing car sounds, and so I brought I had seen a video on the YouTubes, some Eastern European guy who had taken a soda can and simulated the sound of a Ferrari engine with it. And so I got up on stage for my 30 seconds, whipped out the soda can, vibrated with my mouth the sound of race cars to a backdrop of this video of a race car. And it was loud, and it was noisy, it was fun. And so that's how my GDC started, right? Bang. And then by the time the presentation rolled around, again, having worked with David, aka Race Car Guy, for the last year on this sound study, it was pretty natural to just get up and rap about weird noises for cars. So it was fun. It was fun, and I would encourage anyone with a harebrained scheme or a bright idea to submit for that process. They kind of stage it now so that you don't even have to have a whole lot in place when you submit. It's almost a cocktail napkin stage, right? But the process they have in place now for approving talks means that they have mentors that kind of help you shape that into something that people might be interested in seeing. Just quickly, we did a game audio podcast in advance of GDC where we got one of the I don't know if they call them judges or not, but one of the people who approves session talks to kind of dig into what that process is. So if anyone's kind of thinking about it and they want to get their homework in place, it's definitely a resource to kind of listen to someone talk about what it's like from the judge side of things. And I guess I encourage anyone who's interested to just go for it. It's kind of fun.
One thing that struck me too is it's a mix of big places and tiny places that you've never heard of. It's not obviously when the kids are lining up in the hall, that's to go see Naughty Dog, and some of their 15 talks about Drake's Fortune, Uncharted 3, I guess. But yeah, just a real variety, and it seems like they kind of key off of really unique ideas, I think, for the smaller guys. Is that part of it?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that they said was that they have some topics that are kind of evergreen, kind of come back around, and kind of always bear fruit. So the Naughty Dog guys, when they're launching a new game and they got something they can actually talk about, it's just an easy win, right? But then you have all of this discussion that kind of goes on at smaller companies or with people who are maybe a little more outlier, but as you see in the mobile, iOS, and casual market, are really driving a lot of the experimentation, right? And if there's one thing that our industry needs, it's that constant experimentation to kind of drive the ship higher, I guess. And I think they recognize that really well in the diversity of the program. Is that kind of what you were? Okay, dig.
Well, another thing that was like one of the awesomest things I saw was that they had
an experimental gameplay session. Like, I don't know if it's always at the end or whatever, but this time it was at the end. It was like on Friday at like 2:30 or something. But then they just like, I don't know how they chose, but they somehow had, I don't know how many, like 20 or so games that they were just like invited the creators to come up and talk about. They were all like super creative and sort of acknowledged to be like these really experimental games. They're fantastic. That was like a really cool highlight for me too, even though I had to leave like right at the end of it.
My name is August. I work for Congregate doing achievement design. Congregate's a Flash game portal, if you're not familiar with it. And I was out there this week, and I went to a lot of the social games things. And two people from my company ever actually gave a presentation that you can find online if you just Google for it, about what our findings as far as metrics go for catering social games to hardcore gamers, so people with like a background in like Modern Warfare and like those games who then go onto Facebook and are bored with both like the farm bills and whatnot on Facebook, and that these people actually spend a lot of money in games. If you find games that they'll play, League of Legends is a really good example of kind of that growing up. And so we gave a talk that Raph Poster really liked on numbers and what works and what might not work for us. And then most of my time was spent just doing a lot of like social gaming stuff. Daniel James from Three Rings gave a really great kind of roundtable discussion about the current state of social games, and that was probably my highlight, in addition to the Raph Poster talk, who's, I think his slides are either online or bumping around somewhere, but he gave a really amazing talk on Tuesday about good design, bad design, great design in games. That's really inspirational. It's just like this really like incredibly vague like discussion on what a game designer can do as far as like good design and bad design, and kind of his particular Rock Coaster kind of way of delivering that, and that was really good.
That's a good point. There are so many talks going on. Like Marty was saying earlier, you're not going to see everything you want to see, and that's, one reason maybe that you can use some of the video streaming once it goes online to catch up on stuff, but not everything is taped, unfortunately. Okay, and I would go through and try to pick things, and then I wised up halfway through the week and searched by company and by name to make sure I wasn't missing, some crazy thing from somebody I really wanted to see. And that's kind of an interesting thing too, to actually see, these amazing god heroes in the flesh, right? They're just normal people, but it's fun to hear them talk and hear basically their experiences unfiltered through a PR machine. And maybe, does anybody else want to talk, or I can kind of wrap it up too? Okay. Oh yeah, go for it. Can't hear you.
Did anybody who made it to GDC have a chance to watch that game movie that they made? That one company, indie gaming movie?
We waited. It was like a lot. It was just like a lot.
That big, huh?
I wanted to see it so bad.
That's the story of the week, though, isn't it? The lines being a mile long. Yeah.
We usually got in, but it was sitting remotely. Like, I had like 2 people in front of me that had been sitting that got in the last 2 seats. And I was like, well, let's go in and like see if, the more seats will open up. As soon as we walk in, I'm like, oh yeah, no more seats are going to open. And then they said they couldn't bring any more seats in because the fire code was over.
Bummer.
And I actually kickstarted it, so
At some point, I will get the DVD, and when they finally do that, it'd be really sweet to just show it here. I mean, I don't know if that's super illegal or whatever, but yeah, when it happens. Like one thing that kind of pisses me off about them, just like that whole Kickstarter, is that like all these people, hundreds of people, kickstarted to get a DVD, but like it's like they're shipping it out to put it in theaters first, like before the DVDs get released. So who knows when I'll ever get this DVD, right? So I left basically. I wasn't gonna stand up for an hour and a half, even though like it would have been really cool to see, because after that they did a top. There was QA with all the people who had been like in the focus of the movie. Yeah. So that would have been really cool to see, but I just didn't think I could take it.
And real quick, I can just say, from my perspective, I went there kind of as an academic exercise, so to learn stuff. So there was things that directly applied to things I'd worked on. 2 standouts are, well, how does Naughty Dog do cameras for Uncharted 3? And the answer is with a lot of people and a lot of money. So they have wonderful camera moves on the fly because there are hand-placed cameras baked into every animation for every character, several different angles. And then when there's a big fight breaking out, there's kind of basically an AI that has heuristics to choose between all the different cameras that are good choices now, and then interpolate, for a kick to that guy, but he's stuck in the corner, don't pick that one, don't pick that one, let's do a smooth transition over to here. And if you can, it does a hard cut. And if they're doing a hard cut, they take advantage of that to shift the players closer together, because you can't land that punch if you're not the right distance. But if there's a hard camera cut, nobody notices when the guys pop to the exact distance and punch each other. If it's kind of a big weavy camera shot, they just slide along the ground kind of subtly. I'd never picked it up in the game, and I didn't pick it up when it was presented it either. They have that level of resources to do that. But then there's just some small tidbits that you pull out of that and take away for just high-level things like always keeping the camera under the player control, and how they switch between over the shoulder and basically iron sights, this kind of stuff. You're obviously not going to have an animator that can take 5 camera positions in every clip, and then the budget to have a programmer write the program to switch between cameras from all these animation clips. And then another one, worked on some Kinect stuff, and so when you go there, there's the guy from Ireland that writes the Kinect driver, and he's presenting stuff. So then you go talk to him afterwards. Without, Microsoft, obviously a huge company, big wall of PR normally there, that you can't get that access. And then just on kind of a fun level too, just the experimental gameplay, which is something I'd always read about, and you totally didn't do justice. You're like, it was neat. But so the last one was a game for 200 people, play at the same time, so they test out laser pointers. You've maybe seen some stuff like that before, but this is actually, they had a good effort to have a game with mechanics and fighting phases and resource collection phases and building defenses. And basically it's just laser pointers scribbling on a big movie theater screen and trying to cooperate. Yep, I got a couple of stills, but the camera didn't like the bright laser versus the projector image. Yeah. And just craziness. There was an arcade game that went in the Occupy Oakland March, battery powered, big arcade cabinet going down the street. People playing it and other people pushing it. And there was a game that died. The game actually died. You can't play it anymore. It's dead. And the guy spoke, so he couldn't show it, he couldn't play it, but he spoke about how people had this emotional connection to it. There's basically, if you did poorly, the game would lose hit points, and it would get more glitchy. And if you did well, it would gain more life points or hit points. And you talked about one guy that just played it and kind of felt this connection and this responsibility and just kept playing it, to try to keep it alive. And then he had a great story about how he was killed by a drunken Irishman that did the last blow that ended the game. But no stereotypes. And my favorite, because it was just so kind of elegant, I'm sure it'll come back other years, but one called Scale. And it's just, if you can just imagine, you got a portal gun, but instead it just scales things up or down. And you've got kind of a limited resource of scale juice, right? How much you can change something. So it's a platformer puzzler, but just based on these mechanics, there's so many odd and clever and wonderful things you can do. So just starting with basic stuff, there's a butterfly flying around, scale it up and jump on its back. And, you can go across the river, go across the big cavern, or you got to flip a switch and run all the way to the top of that mountain. So you just point your thing at the ground and scale the world down. You get over there a lot faster in the mountain. The mountain's a lot easier to climb because it's little. And just different puzzles like that, scaling up and down different trees and buildings, and scale up a wall so you can fit through this little crack in the bottom, and then scale it back down to reclaim your resources. And one that really struck me is you just kept trying to grow this object, and everything else in the environment had been scaled all the way down to little, pea-sized things. And you just pointed the gun at a cloud and scaled it down. You assume it's in the background, but no, you can do it on everything. So that looks like that'll really be pretty neat. I think it'll be very challenging to make puzzles that aren't breakable, because that's such a powerful mechanic. Just as an example, he's got a pit of spikes, and leaves are falling off the tree, leaves, and you can scale them up and hook them in there and then jump on them to get across. Or you can just scale up the spike field and walk between the spikes because they're spread out now. So it's kind of an example of something that could break if you didn't have a way to constrain it, artificially put in a big box or something like that. Like Portal has the walls you can't use all over the place to make the puzzles more difficult. Cool. Well, I think we're going to take like a 5 to 10 minute break, do an A/B change.
So the parent company where I work is IGDA, and they, as was announced, they've been looking for a game prototype developer on the innovation team. That's basically the R&D team. The innovation team.
Yeah. Nobody else gets to innovate. That's basically the R&D arm of UHG, which is a ginormous company. If you're not familiar with it, it's like 90,000 people, no joke. So this is game prototyping, and they're obviously moving into their approach, which has to do with healthcare and serious gaming, I guess, is the category that fits under. We'll put the link up on the website, which will push it out to Twitter and Facebook if you want to check that out. And I was going to announce the Unity thing. Marty stole my thunder, but if you didn't hear until April 8th, when you go to get your free version of Unity, which is always free, you can check the boxes to get free Android and iOS attached to that license key. So maybe you get a couple. And
for anybody that's using Pro, you can also add the free versions on your Pro license if you haven't already. So it'll save you $800.
Okay, so even if you already have a paid license.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if you can have the 3.4 version, they make it look like you have to download the 3.5 version, but if you still have 3.4, the licenses will work with 3.4.
Okay. Cool. All right, so let's get started here. This is Dustin Smither from Warp Reform, which is a clever acronym.
Thank you. First of all, is the microphone working? Can you hear me? All right. I talk with my hands, so you're just going to have to get used to that. It's very distracting, especially for me. I'm going to work with one, and a lot of times we do bigger projects that involve a lot of asset handling, and we take on such big projects because we have developed a lot of systems that streamline our import process. Unity is very smooth and slick for bringing assets, but a lot of times we need to do a little bit more. And so what I'm presenting to you today is what's called the 3D virtual tabletop, and it's something that came out of that type of project. Here's a shot of it, and the thing I really have to get across to you tonight is this is not a game. It is a platform. Usually when I explain this to people who are very into tabletop games, Dungeons and Dragons, Warhammer, Warhammer 40K, that type of thing, they completely get this. I have noticed whenever I'm talking to a peer or a fellow game developer, they immediately go, "Oh, so what game is it? What do you play?" And it's frustrating because that's the antithesis of this project. So clear your mind of it being a game, please. Okay. First off, we're going to define what a tabletop is. A tabletop is a game you play on the table. It is played without the assistance of a computer at all. So, role-playing games, war games, even board games like Monopoly, you do not need a computer to play these games, which is kind of odd because some of the first and earliest computer games were computerized versions of board games. So, we've kind of got it in our head that a computer game and a board game can be the same thing, and really they're not. Popular examples, like I said, are Warhammer, Pathfinder, Lord of the Rings, Dungeons and Dragons, Magic the Gathering, Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh! Not a fan. And these companies are successful. A lot of firms are privately owned. One example I was able to dig out, after sifting through the balance sheet with some accountants, some highlights from Games Workshop, which owns a lot of tabletop IP. In 2011, this is a down year. They had a revenue of $192 million. That's a lot of money. Their straight profits, though, were about $20 million. Now, they did pay out to shareholders, so they didn't have that bad a year. But that's just to give you an idea of really how big this market is. It's huge. The next thing that we need to talk about is why do people use virtual tabletops? And this is really critical. People use virtual tabletops because regular tabletop gaming, for whatever reason, is unavailable or inaccessible. This can involve cost. This can involve geography, distance from other players. The setup and transportation for a lot of these games can be very difficult, and frankly, the time it takes. I'll give you a couple examples. One of my favorites, the one that I always wanted to play, was a game called Warhammer 40K. Anyone familiar with it? All right. Is Games Workshop a soul-sucking, money-draining entity? Right? This is an expensive game. I'll tell you how they make their money. I'll pass these around. These are little models for space marines. There's 5 of them. These little screws, I'll just start handing this one around here. $25. Right? And this isn't even enough to play a game. You need 2 of those. That's $50 plus a single more powerful character, which is around $20. So we're looking at around $120. But you still have to assemble them. You still have to paint them. And you need a friend who wants to play with you, who has that kind of time and money. Most of us have lives. Or it happens to us at some point, unfortunately. I'm married. My wife will kill me. When I brought those home, she about strangled me. She says, "Don't you start." Oh, if I really wanted to do it, I'd be a lot scarier. My wife's sweet woman when she's mad. She's the devil. I'd never get her to. But it takes a while. These things are extremely small. There's actually some of the case up there that are already painted up. They're actually pretty well painted, so I take a look. They're fragile. You have to buy cases just to carry them. Foam padded cases. Think like, in those games with the guns where you pull them out of the briefcase and you assemble them and you start shooting people? You need that case for these games. They're hugely expensive. A good game will last about 5 hours. You get the idea. current 2D virtual tabletops are kind of odd to me because really they're not tabletops. They're specialized chat programs. They're really geared towards automating game functions for a specific game, generally geared towards like D&D or what's called D20 rules. Anyone not know what that is? You are my people. Some, and now most of them, they have a feature that they're very proud of called 3D dice. But it's a chat program, right? It automates the game. It plays the game for you. But what it doesn't do is actually solve the problems inherent with meeting virtually. So it lacks the human element. It's more about text. There's a couple different types of tables, and I'm categorizing broadly. If you know of a separate category that completely defies this, in context of this presentation, I don't care. But these are the main ones. There's the map display, the stat manager, and the 3D grid. So here's the map type, and this is based around the idea of a big image with a grid on it. It's called Battlegrounds, and the GM client is about $39. The player client is about $19. You have to have both of them really in order to play, and it's okay. It's not very stimulating for me, at least. We have the stat monster type. This is actually the most successful virtual tabletop out there. It's called Fantasy Ground. It is a modular RPG system. You need to program for it. You need to buy special modules. Ooh, 3D dice. See? It's a great feature. But here again, it's not really a tabletop. This is really automation. This is essentially a C# application. This is the wicked ugly 3D grid. This is a category. When looking for a 3D tabletop, because we actually built the initial check before we ever did any research for it, this was really the best I could find. There have been many attempts at doing this, but a lot of them are kind of homebrew things. And here again, they're building in game functions that are things that normally in tabletop games you do yourself. Half the fun is looking at the person you're playing with across the table and go, "You're a liar," and arguing about rules. Bickering is fun. So, for me, the biggest thing is, on any of those, I really can't play this. It doesn't work. This game kind of assumes you have 3D physical models. There is one exception in the world of virtual tabletops. It's called Vassal Engine. Here's a shot of another miniatures war game called War Machine. It's kind of a steampunk variant. It's generally poor quality 2D art. It requires special modules to be programmed before you can play specific rule sets on them, which means that you may want to play that game, but you can't, which is completely counterintuitive. Give me a couple of quarters, some pieces of paper, we can play this game right now. No programming required. Really, the mediocres are visuals, or just mediocre visuals. This is what the game is supposed to look like. Right? Giant killer robot. That's the fun part about games, right? It's 3D, it's thrilling, it's fun to look at. You can move it around, you can look at it from different angles. It's exciting. And even Vassal, which covers wargaming, it just doesn't do it. So when we sat down, we decided that with the tech that we had, we wanted to make a 3D virtual tabletop. We had some design goals. One, it should be strongly visual, primarily all about art. There should be no programming needed to play any game, really. You needed to be able to add easily custom 3D art, which for games like War Machine, Warhammer, Gear Creep, if you don't know what this is, check it out, it's awesome. It's all about hobby, building your own stuff, building your own pieces and building your own scenery. Really fun stuff. It's especially fun for us because for a lot of us, this is why we got into games. Like me, I love making scenery and 3D characters. It's awesome. But most of all, we wanted to design it to meet the needs of the market. People who really wanted this type of thing. These are people who are, like me, pushing or just pushed a little past 30, have a spouse, want kids, spouse wants you to get a job so you can have kids, that type of thing. So in that research, there were 4 main categories of concerns that people had with current generation 2D tabletops. Interfaces and features, supported game usability, gaming value, and visual quality. A couple of standout quotes from all the copious amounts of forum crawling is, I need simple interfaces. I don't need ornate combat calculators. And all I want is something to simulate the actual tabletop. Dice, minis, mapping, all of which are intuitive. Now, anyone who's done development knows that you can't program intuitive to use. It takes a lot of work and it takes a lot of design. But that's what people want. Being able to support any tabletop game. It sounds simple, but it's actually quite tricky. A lot of them use a lot of complicated mechanics that if you build them into the system, it's just not going to work. It's going to preclude other games. There was a lot of griping about having to plug in stats. I played D&D once for about a month, and it was terrible. I have no patience for stats. I was a barbarian with a hammer, and usually I would just, until it was my turn, and whatever was around me, I would hit it with a hammer, and sob quietly when it wasn't my turn. So, a lot of people found Fantasy Grounds, again, more popular, difficult to use. They said, I have personally a hard time learning how to drag and drop results, abilities, etc. from one window to the other. A steep learning curve is a very bad thing. Gaming value. Now this one's, it kind of cuts to the heart of the difference between a computer game and a real tabletop experience. Tabletop games are intensely social. They have less to do with the game and more to do with the people. It's about being able to talk and work with others. When you're playing a massive online multiplayer version of an RPG, you have leveling up, but it's a different kind of thing. You don't really have to be around others. You don't have to be talking to them. In the office, whenever we play cooperative games, sometimes we'll just be in different parts of the net, not even talking to each other. Tabletop games are about the fun that you can have interacting with the person across the table. Not necessarily just staring at a keyboard and trying to push the button fast enough. The need for quality artwork. Of the 3D tabletops that I did find, there were some that were close. There's actually one that's not even around anymore. It looks a lot like what we built. But what they weren't able to do was set up a pipeline to get art to people, which is another way of saying they couldn't get product to customers. So it went away. So why is our 3D virtual tabletop better? Our main goal is focusing on the physical tabletop experience rather than video game-like mechanics. I'm not going to say that there's not a lot of programming that has gone into this project because that's an outright lie. There's been a lot. But we put it in places that allow you to have tools to play games like you would in the real world, instead of tools to play a specific game a little bit faster, a little bit more conveniently. That's given us the ability to have games, or to have a tabletop that can play any game, and I mean any game. It's completely possible to play Magic, Pokemon, any kind of dice game you want, Warhammer RPG, whatever. So, this actually works. I'm going to go and show you a little bit about how it works. It's a live demo. Might crash. No, it should crash. Can you bring down the main lights just a little bit? Thanks. Okay, an important part here, the first thing that pops up, and this is actually a very new feature, this is our model store. The first thing we want to do is allow people to get models. What we're able to do now is take a user we don't know, give them the ability to upload models and textures, and have them securely distributed to users. So when I downloaded these models, and I've already done it, they're mine. I can't transfer them around. They only work on my system, which is a really important part of creating a business model, is creating security. How many of you are artists? Okay. How many of you just willy-nilly give out your Macs or Blender files? Yeah. You may not realize that you guard those like a hawk. The idea of handing out your stuff is scary. Our biggest concern has been securing and locking down those files. It is successful, and I'm very proud of that feature. And you're going to see this model store filling up in the near future. So we'll go ahead and set up a single player right now since it's just us. So you'll notice one thing first and foremost, there are virtually no tools. We have a little bar here along the bottom. That's our only concession to any kind of tools interface. The rest of it is just mouse clicks and a couple of fairly easy to remember shortcuts. The thing about our learning curve is it's just steep enough to give you a lot of powerful control, but easy enough that you don't need to worry about it too much. So, first thing I'll do is just change the environment a little bit. So we have a couple built-in skies, things like that. Easy and fast. These changes in multiplayer happen in real time, so anyone can access these controls. There are no host controls. You have the ability to be just as much fun or as annoying as you want to be in real life at a real table. Sorry to really big control freaks. I'm not sus. All right. By hitting tab, you can open the library. I'll throw out two pieces. I'll throw out a terrain piece. This was made in 10 minutes to prove a point to someone on our forums. Okay. So, you'll notice it's got a grid on it. The grid was there to point out that you don't need to build grids into the system. You can build grids into models. I want you to think of these as literal products, as toys. These are all things that were built in Blender. Most of them textured very quickly. I regret to say by me. I model them really fast to do a lot of prototypes, but quality is not where I'd like it to be. But we have some quick controls. Right now, if we want to, we can move around our pieces, which can be a little annoying. Other people can move them as they want. So you can quickly lock those controls just by pressing L. You have the ability to select pieces and move them. You select with the left mouse button. You place with the right. You are able to drag and move things around, but in 3D that can be a little weird. So the left mouse, right mouse taking place method is the way that we're going with right now. It is possible to change those up. We're leaving that to our beta testers to kind of decide what they want. So you have the ability to rotate pieces to face that they want. In war games, for example, you encounter a situation where you're dealing with distance to a target. So we have very precise measuring, which also actually acts as a line of sight. These are very simple tools. You're not supposed to be wowed by any of the technology here. A lot of this is kind of duh. But it's stuff no one's ever built. So, there. Our models are actually a lot better because when you look at it, I made these three models once. Now, if we go back to our... Where's my little model that I handed out? Oh! All right. That's $25. Come on. No! My wife will kill me. When you look at these are $5. One model in our store can still be $5, and one model is $5. You can even have variations. We're working on a couple different pricing methods to help impulse buy so that you can have one model that you sell and you have a similar model that's now at a reduced price. But I'm kind of getting a little ahead of myself here. I get very excited about this because this means that I can play war games. In fact, we test out our games, our system with real games. But again, digressing. We have other features called a scramble bag, which lets you put objects in other objects. And this is a really important feature because all of our models do this to an extent. Is you can put models in others. So here we're getting a little bit away from tabletops, but if you look at it, I'll just use this one here. That's what I get for using a prototype build. Anyway, that works well for things like transports. Is anyone here a Warhammer 40K fan? All right. When you put a group of models in a Rhino transport, do they actually go in that model? Of course not. They go off to the side. In ours, they go right inside the model. It's a small but nifty feature. There is chat built into the multiplayer, but what you're looking at here is, by and large, all of the features. So, looking at our downloads, let's grab a few more of these. We have a couple of building pieces, and I'm just going to form them together into something kind of like a ruin. Now, a feature that we just recently added is a feature that we call glue. It allows you to group a bunch of models. You hit the G key. Really simple. Now, whenever you grab that model, you're grabbing all three, and it moves and rotates as one piece, which is really important for building pre-built scenes. One thing that's becoming very popular right now is modular D&D systems. You know the ones, the tiles, the floor tiles with the walls, and you can put them together into all sorts of different arrangements, and they cost like $1 bajillion. With these, they're dirt cheap, or they're free because you can make them yourself, or make them yourself. The reason behind that is we made sure that adding a file to this is not a complex process. All you do is you model it, assuming you know how to model, granted. You export it as a Collada file, and you put it in a folder in your 3D directory, and it just loads inside of the library. Most games, you just can't do that. They're static files, but that's all you need. We play it a lot of times with Skype. You know, the Unglues, it's Alt-G. We play with Skype a lot, and in our testing, it has been just as much fun as playing for real. We have nothing in here that does math. Nothing does any counting for you. There's no rules. This is just manipulating 3D art. And that's the program. So, give me a sec here. I'll just shut this off.
You didn't show the dice.
Oh, the dice. I forgot our 3D dice. I'll show you the 3D dice. Sorry. 3D dice is a sore subject with me. They are, okay. Ours aren't quite based on random number generators. Ours actually roll. So what you're seeing isn't a specific roll. It's actually applying a speed and a rotation, and then it breaks it. Whatever normal is facing down, it clamps down. So that works for all sorts of dice. Yay. We have 3D dice too. Can I stop showing the dice now? Thank you. What? I don't know. I rolled a 10 and a 5 and a 1 and a 7 and a 1 and a 6. Hi! All right. So, why do you care? That's the biggest question. There are three primary groups of people who would really care about this. Game developers and designers, 2D and 3D artists, and players. Right now, we have unconnected groups. There are people who are paying up the nose for models. Now, admittedly, the hobby's enjoyable. I'm a little tempted to put these together and paint them. I'm very annoyed at the prospect of having to do it 5 times. But it seems fun. But there's also this other group of artists that do tons of good work. You know this stuff. This is the stuff that you go trolling and you're like, oh, that is so cool. I wish I could paint like that. Or I wish I could model like that. And then there are players, and then there are game designers who go, I want to build a game like that. I have an idea for that. It would be so cool. I have an idea for a card game. A collectible card game. It would be so cool. I wish I could prototype it out. But I can't because that would take so much time and effort in putting the cards through. How do you find players? All these groups have these problems. Our goal is to merge these groups together to create a market so that game designers are able to make games, contact artists to actually make these models and sell them, and players to play these games because they love it, because in a lot of cases they can. I tell people early on that the people who are playing these games now will eventually have to stop because it's expensive, because they don't have the time, because they may not have the resources. There's going to be there's demand now, and there's going to be a bigger demand later. Everybody is feeling that economic pinch. This is a virtual system. The $192 million the Games Workshop made, a lot of that got eaten up in just dealing with the physical nature of their product. Shipping, storage, material costs. A lot of that's going to waste. So the official benefits for game designers, being able to bring concepts to life by creating 3D tabletop versions of their games. It allows you to quickly prototype ideas and generate marketable games for sale. The best way to explain this is when you start programming a video game, programmers almost always start with ideas. You don't have to program in art. You don't have to program in real stuff. The game can be written in rule format, and the art can be created by the artist to do whatever it needs to do visually to convey what it does. That's very general. Because this is a remote program, you can remotely collaborate. There are people who just move away. When I was in college, we had a lot of good people that I really enjoyed working with, and most of them are gone. This is something you can play test together while discussing it, while looking at better and better art every time. One of the most powerful tools for game developers is the idea of metrics. Metrics is similar to Google Analytics, but it allows us to track what people are using. This 3D program is free to use. It doesn't cost anything, which is a really big competitive advantage over things like fantasy grounds. But we're able to tell, for instance, if someone puts a rule book on the table, which is forthcoming functionality, we can tell you what page people are on. We can tell you what models people are using over other models. We can tell you what's selling well, what people want. Imagine having that kind of feedback at this juncture without having to have a large corporation behind it. Mostly, it's cost competitive. Now, from our perspective, when we want to make a product, it costs so much to make the product, and then we release it, and any kind of manufacturing costs get factored into that. But because we're going digital, you build it, you publish it, that's the end of your costs. That's it. Benefits for content creators. This is either 2D or 3D. 2D would be more like cards and game art and things like that. But they're nonetheless. You can make art for profit. Like I said, modelers on sites like Polycount and CD Society, they're creating models that are simply showcases. They rarely see any usage. In fact, one of the things that drives me most crazy is on those really nice showpieces, they put them on little bases, like they're figurines. And I look at that, I'm like, that, I want that. I want to sell that. That would be amazing. I want it. I want to be able to look at it. It's great. It is a form for creativity. Look, it's kind of fun to have people see your work and tell you how good or could be better. The 3VT, you can show off an entire model and not just renders. Your store page, you get individual store pages. You can link back to a URL of your choice. This can lead to future job opportunities. If people who are game designers really like your work, They have a means to contact you and set up a deal to make art for their game. Most importantly, at the end of the day, for me as a modeler and someone who just likes to make something cool, I look at this and I see this, I have a way to make money. I can do what I love and get something done. I am not promising millions. Not even for myself. What I'm saying is, you can see something back for it. Even if it's enough to, pay your internet bill. It's something. Just as an aside for content creators, when we make stuff, we make it because we're passionate about it. We pour so much of ourselves into it. And for me, I show it to like my mom or my dad, and they're like, "That's nice, dear. I don't understand any of it." and they don't know. Being able to get a little bit of income from that is validating in a way that is so hard to do these days. So that's my passionate moment for content creators. Benefits for players, the people who really love these games. You can play anytime, play with anyone, anytime. You don't have to wait for conventions. You don't have to travel really far. You can just play. Pickup games become possible with this system. Imagine just doing a pickup game of Warhammer or Warhammer 40K. Tough to do because there's so much logistics and arranging. But being able to do it, you just can't sleep, your buddy's up, play a game. Being able to game on a grand scale. These books, these rule books for these games, they're half rule books. Well, they're about a third rule book and 2/3 catalog. And the big dream they have is just these massive tables. You know the ones. Decked out, really awesome scenery, lots of tanks, big demon, flapping wings, right? It's unattainable. If you can ever afford that many models, you'll never have time to paint. And if you do, it probably won't be that good of a paint job. Being able to buy one and be able to replicate it, we're playing with huge armies. We have one coming up, and if you 40K people can just go ooh ah when I say this, we're planning a 9,000 point per side army. Yeah. Probably Apocalypse. We're doing it in 3 detachments. I'm not going to go all nerdy on everyone right yet. But that's pretty impressive. You just can't do that anymore. Higher quality game pieces. A game like Gear Creek, I love it to death, but one of the things that they give you is wonderful little cutout pieces that can be your game pieces. The thing that makes Gear Creek cool is these tanks that convert into walkers, diesel-powered, giant Tesla coils shooting out and flying people. Paper cutouts just don't cut mustard. You don't have to deal with that anymore as a player. A low barrier of entry to try new games. Games that are asset-heavy, and I'm talking physical assets, are an investment. People are paying hundreds, if not thousands of dollars over the course of the hobby in order to play these games. And switching games, it's like getting a divorce. What do you do with all this stuff? Who do you give it to? It's a nightmare. With cheaper models comes the ability to try more stuff. With the ability to try more stuff, it means that, well, for you as developers, people are going to be more apt to try your stuff. Which is exciting for me. Being able to sell virtual models means that you can have strategies on how to sell them, because one model doesn't cost you any more than the others. So you can be more competitive with a real-world manufacturer that's trying to drive you out. You all know the idea of a big company crushing the little guy. In a virtual setting, the big guy can't compete with the little company, because our stuff costs us nothing to make. your stuff, really, once it's made, it costs you nothing. It's power. It's power for you. It's power for the consumer. So, I hope this has been some food for thought. Consider it. We don't do a ton of tabletop playing because for us, we're in the interactive industry. But at the core of it, we love games. We love the worlds that they create and the bonds that it helps us create with our friends. That's the heart of what a tabletop game is. And I'm excited to be a part of it. And we're coming up on our Beta 5 release. We're testing out online network play, so it's kind of a big step for us. If you'd like to get a copy of the program, like I said, it's free, just register. Make sure you say hi in the forums. Give it a shot. Thank you very much. Any questions? Yeah? Baylor, I think you had your hand up first. Yeah. A little bit. You know, it's interesting because I'm not sure if you know, we're using Unity. So we have the full power of the game engine at our disposal. One of our core principles is don't over-engineer. So the decision of whether to add in specialized effects is a big one. I love it when people say that. There's been some talk because one of my partners on this, Tom Finnegan, who's been the principal programmer, he's very opposed to throwing in unnecessary features or anything that basically turns us into one of our competitors. But I have persuaded him with one point. That's the pay grade. If people want features like that, it's perfectly possible to create a version that has grid snapping and particle effects. It's even possible to take the platform we have now and create specialized clients. So let's say you wanted to create, a gear creative game where you're, frying the poor soldiers with those wonderful Tesla coils. It's perfectly possible to add that in as a feature. Our hope is that this is actually a springboard to turn tabletop games because you can take a character model, for instance. If you're going to be selling it off in different poses with different weapons and different things, you're still rigging it. It still has all these options. You're most of the way there in terms of your asset creation. If your game is popular enough, there's nothing holding you back from going on and making the full 3D interactive version of the video game. So our hope is that people are going to be less interested in making a particle-emitting animation version on our system and more interested in taking a look at their artists who made their stuff and going, well, let's take this to the next step. Make sense?
How will it work if you support multiplayer, right? So other people can be logged in the same session. If I have purchased models and let's say Sean has not purchased the models, how will that?
I completely forgot that. You had me going on the dice. All right. One of the magics of 3DVT is model transfer. So, modeler? Modeler? Okay, kind of? Okay. Let's say you make a model. I bought it in the store. You didn't. When I put it on the table, a copy of it is transferred to yours. It's copying in about 10 to 12 seconds right now. First comes a little gray brick and then the model and the texture. About 10 seconds. When we disconnect, you don't have that model anymore, but I still do. So even there, we're replicating that process of taking any unique object, putting it on a table, and it's there for everyone to use. And then when we all go home, we take it with you. There's no host controls. So one of the things that comes up in questions and comes up in a couple of forum discussions that I've been having is what kind of controls does a host have in terms of moderating and forcing everyone to do this. And our answer to most questions on this project is about the same as real life. You can invite them into your house and you can throw them out. Shoot.
So it's basically the host library.
Nope. Anyone can contribute anything. You can make your own unique models. If we wanted to, I could throw in a model I've been working on and transfer it to different systems. To the model store? Glad you asked. We have an approval system. It's not an automatic immediate thing. We are not going for any kind of illegal stuff where like, well, we just host the system. We don't do anything illegal. No, we're not doing it. I'm meeting with lawyers tomorrow. It's wonderful. One of our big concerns is there's a piece of it's almost urban legend. I've heard it said. I've never heard it quoted directly from Games Workshop, talking about specifically 40K or any of your other titles. Really, if a video game design concept is too close to the tabletop version, it will not be made. We're doing it. So it is conceivable that if we didn't take steps to safeguard their intellectual property rights, they would just scare students. And even if we didn't do something illegal, we would have almost no choice, unless we had really good lawyers, I hope I do, than to shut down. So the approval process is two-part. There's a technical process, which basically takes a look at the vert count. Right now, a good vert count for a character model is between 3,000 to 5,000. You can have huge numbers. The bigger your model is, the more textures it has, the larger texture it has, the longer it takes to transfer. And load. I love it when people ask questions like that. Yeah, there are plans. It is after we're sure it's going to make at least enough to buy pizza for us every week, that is a feature we're going to be adding. Unity is a remarkable operating tool. We love it a lot, and there's almost nothing that you can't do with it. Every now and again, I look at my programming guys and I tell them everything I want it to do. And they always kind of hang their heads a little bit. But if any of you are here for the Global Game Jam, remember when I said the term walnut, crazy artist? Right here. Yeah, you can paint. In fact, we figured out a way where you can have a textured overlay that's basically gray, and you can just change the colors, or you can completely replace it. So you can have, in essence, a kind of detail map on the model. But yeah, there's features coming from that. Right now, models out of the store, you can change the texture, but we could just as easily turn that off and let you just paint the texture like you would otherwise. So, yes. Kyle was just talking to me about it. He says it seems it's a lot like Steam in terms of just dealing with models. We're not selling games, well, we could sell games, and they could be just as secure. Yeah, we're a store. We're that corner comic book store with all the cool stuff that maybe you're going to buy, maybe you're not. But all we do is we sell models, we sell rule books. What you do with them in the system is completely up to you. Into the chat system, we're going to be building the plan is to build a concealable log, so you can get an idea of what people are doing, but for the most part leaving it out so that you don't have to look at all that, you can just see what people are discussing. We want to give people tools to detect shenanigans like that, but not necessarily prevent people from doing them, because it's funny.
I guess, what is the
camera. Oh, what I can say is, I like pointed something I want to say, hey, I'm playing Scott on this guy. Hey, Scott, look at this guy. How do I say forgot to show pointing. We have kind of a lights from heaven pointing tool. If you're not looking directly at it, or if you're really far away, a little waypoint pops up on the screen. You click the waypoint showing. You have your own screens. We modeled the controls roughly along the lines of a real-time strategy game. The reason for the design choice behind that was if it's a virtual tabletop and you're over a table, it kind of makes sense. It's completely possible to let people have views where they could run along the ground, but that's probably the pay client thing for later.
We play like some more role-playing games. We've had a lot of times you just kind of audio stuff like kind of ambient between that and then change it if something's happening. If you take a lever or something like that, it's also some audio folks in like a cell audio packs backgrounds or something like that.
You know, there's been a lot of chatter for did anyone get that audio clips? There's been some chatter about it. I almost might consult with you before you even approach it, but I'll give you my gut response. If you can handle that type of thing through Skype or some other means, that might work better. Because we're really trying not to overcomplicate the core program, because the less complex the program is, the less it crashes, the less bugs. But I think that there's a place for audio, but not for a little while. And like I said, I'm going to talk to you about that. So.
Actually, one last question. Okay. For the licensing issues, can you say actually support emails and put it in your utility? Because it's cool, it's amazing to use. And for people that don't want to program, I want to build a level and recording the video. No sound.
To do a level in here?
Yeah, create a level and export it. And then sell that.
The ground piece is one object. So yes, it's perfectly possible. I built that in about a week or so, give or take, in Blender, and it comes in as one piece. It takes a good like 5-6 seconds to even load, because we can't hide our load time really. When you play most games today, you have a little bit of load time, but you have to deal with that as a player. In fact, one of the concerns I brought up with people on the forum when they're talking about, your 5,000 vert count recommendation seems a little strict, and I say, well, it's really just a recommendation. You can put as much stuff on there until it crashes. We have not had that problem yet. So yeah, you could put a level in there and sell it as a single piece. I find for what seems to make the most sense is break that up into little pieces. You can't see it really well, but if you look at it, it's made up of about 15 little pieces that are just repetitive. So to me, little pieces make more sense, but if you want to sell a big piece for a bunch of money, I think you could.
I kind of meant like actually creating a level in there for a video game you want to make it sell.
Yeah, oh yeah. I originally started that for another project we were working on, and I just thought it'd be fun to throw in here. Yeah. Yeah. Something like that. We haven't put in a group chat yet, but the current plan is with the Unity Master Server, we're going to be able to have a list of current games that are up, and whether or not they're password protected. So if it's an open game and anyone's invited, they can come in. So like, I go in and I go, this is Dustin's game, and anybody can join. I'm playing Fiddlesticks. And you can hop in. Yeah. That we're working on right after the online multiplayer, because we're prioritizing in terms of most like a tabletop. So in a real tabletop venue, unless you're leaving it up overnight, you have to tear down at the end of the session. But we're thinking of ways to do that without compromising security, because in order to save that, you have to save it on somebody's computer or everybody's computer. We really that's one big file that contains everything. And if you put in a file that has everything you've ever bought in the store, that could really compromise our vendors. So we're trying to think of a way to do it creatively so that it doesn't threaten. But that's one of the things we're doing. Have I ignored anybody in the back? Along with the painting program, we're actually working on, we've been calling it Workbench. So you can create preset groups that can be then broken up later. That's the hope, but again, that's after multiplayer, that's after scene saving, and that's after we can order pizza with what we made off of it. Yeah. Yeah, that's my hope with Workbench. And the current products aren't limited to bone products. You could build in a piece or a model that says this tank piece could swivel. But we need to, for us as people who have, built this thing just because we wanted to see it, we thought other people would like it. We need to see that there's going to be that kind of following before we're going to build in that level of, control, especially because we're big believers in the core system needs to work really, really, really well before you start adding other nifty features. Did you know? What I would envision is if you've ever used Sculptress, Mudbox, yeah, kind of like ZBrush, where you can paint directly on the model, and you never actually have to deal with the texture. That's one way of approaching it. You could also deal with a situation where you're giving them the texture and replacing it. If you're interested in adding your own models, I can give you a quick rundown. Export it in Collada format. The units are generic with a grid unit of 1. And then, for simplicity's sake, name the texture the exact same thing as the model. And it'll work. So, we're dealing with that level of simplicity. So. I'll give you what Tom gives me for the answer.
That's about as much as I know. Collada is an exchange program, so you don't really know
I kind of have 2 questions. In terms of, meeting with the lawyers, have you guys had any thoughts on potentially kind of turning this on its head? It seems like the aim here is to attack the megacorp that's got the
I wouldn't say attack, I actually want to sell their stuff.
Right. That was my question exactly. Is the idea to go to them and say, hey guys, you're spending X on manufacturing, would you rather spend 10% X to manufacture things?
Do you guys remember when I was talking about the Vassal engine? Is that kind of similar? Sorry guys, probably the 2D version. Interesting. Games Workshop has a module, and they forced them to take it down. These guys endorsed it. So we're dealing with different levels of awareness. I know that War Machine has sold all the rights to their video game rights. One thing I have to check with the lawyers or the outsiders is whether video game rights is the same thing as digital model distribution, and whether we can get those. We really desperately want as many game designers, modelers, and other projects, not so much because of the money aspect, because we think this is a really good thing to have. This is a really good opportunity for people to build on extremely motivating and invigorating to have someone really value something you do, whether it's artistic or game design, which to me is the same thing as artistic. So our hope is to capture these large companies, but we are first and foremost proponents of the little guys. So our fear is that a company as large as Game Workshop might see this as a threat, would try and squash it, and we'll fight tooth and nail to have that not happen by making sure that none of you knowingly or unknowingly violate copyright.
Does it help that fancy flights kind of local?
Oh, I want to talk to them. I do. To me, they're kind of the gateway in the Games Workshop. I'm hoping that we can have even a small grassroots following. I'll tell you a funny story. Strictly speaking, we haven't gone long. I put up, a couple of videos on YouTube, just kind of testing it out, codecs and things. I was setting up a forum on our website, and in the 5 minutes that I had it open, someone jumped into my forum and said, "I'm really excited about this. Are you really working on this?" That was about a month ago. We were picking up about 1 to 2 users a day. So we're hitting around our 50, 60 mark sometime before the end of the month. People are very excited about it. We're pushing as hard as we can, as fast as we can, to make sure that we're able to meet those needs and make sure that we're not compromising the core design philosophy of being able to play anything, do anything, be as fun or enjoying as you like.
Would it be possible or is it a plan to release an SDK at some time? So I can take this, throw in mechanics on it, and then kind of redistribute that non-money earning away to my friends who can play with my business.
To me, I'd have to take a look at the Unity terms of service. Because one of the big no-nos with Unity is that you are not allowed to use Unity to make another editor, specifically sell it, or distribute it in a way. I think if it were a business venture, if you were using, if we had a API, that type of thing could be arranged, but I would definitely want to make sure that you and I are going to have a core.
Well, I mean, the alternative to that would be nice, plugging in what people would be able to distribute that kind of thing through the virtual table.
At the same time, that's getting into that area of it might violate our Unity license. Now, none of the technology that we're using is actually dependent on any Unity system. I'm not sure if you noticed, we're not even using Unity Pro or transferring assets. To me, that's kind of cool. One of our favorite little hobbies is circuit bending. Stuff that Unity doesn't want you to do, only you pay for it to do. It's not that we're, bitter or anything. We just enjoy breaking barriers. But what we don't want to